Hello, it's me. This is just a quick note as this will be the final episode of 2025. Next week is Christmas Eve, and I do have a plan for New Year's Eve, but it will only be if Matt is willing to play ball and sit down. So this will be the last episode of Only Dead Fish Go with the Flow for 2025, but we will be back on the 7th of January 2026. 2025 has been such a special year, and I actually can't believe that I started this, and I can't believe the amount of support I've had from so many different people from so many different walks of life. So I am very, very grateful. I hope there are many different bits of Only Dead Fish merch under the Christmas tree for some people. That's a crazy prospect in itself. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome to your weekly reminder that Only Dead Fish Go with the Flow. This week, I am sat down virtually through the computer with Olympic silver medalist from the 2008 Beijing Games, Modern Pentathlon. I remember watching this before I started my sports journey in my grandparents' sitting room on their leopard print cushions, very bougie. Heather Fell, presenter, mother, triathlete, Ironman, and now this week's victim/guest for the podcast. So welcome very warmly to the podcast. I'm trying to get my words out. I've just started.
Don't worry.
Please, could you sort of name and explain the Modern Pentathlon? Because to me, sounds like many, many different spinning plates.
Yeah, it's a few. You've just made me feel really old.
I'm so sorry.
No, I am old now, and it's totally cool. And it's so funny when I do talk about it, and the fact that now there's been another Olympics in Beijing, but obviously the winter version in 2022. And I'm like, if people want to believe that that's the one I went to, I'm just like, fine, yeah, that you can believe that, and I'll just smile. But yes, it was a summer sport, and it's a very long story about the sport, so I will explain what it was when I did it. It seems to be ever changing, our sport of Modern Pentathlon, and if you're interested, I'd go look it up, because what we're going to see in LA is going to be something very different. Well, part of it's going to be very different, but it is.
That's actually, sorry to interrupt you, but that's actually the same for rowing in LA.
Okay.
They're cutting our distance.
Wow.
So
making everything better for the short attention span and more exciting and whatever, more attractive to the youth and cheaper. And yeah, we'll see where that goes. But yeah, so it's shooting, fencing, swimming, horse riding, and running in a very short synopsis.
what does the training look like for that week? Because there's so many different disciplines, and it must need lots of different hours in different disciplines.
Yeah, do you know, I was really grateful for Modern Pentathlon training, because I had quite a few friends who were rowers, and then I had quite a few friends who were swimmers. Equally, I had some who did sprinting, so those guys got off very light. But compared to rowers and swimmers, I think we got the good deal. We probably did more hours, but it's not all really hard, and it's also some of it's more skill based than physical based. And as a result, every day was different, and some days we would actually do all 5 sports, never sort of back to back, so to speak. But Tuesday and Thursday were the big days, and we'd start training. It was quite a nice time, start at 9 a.m. or 8:30, but we wouldn't finish till 9:30 at night. We'd have breaks and lunch and whatever, but that would be a full on day. But I came from a swimming background, so I was used to doing 4 hours in a pool a day, and that would all be pretty much hard or all physical, and you'd have to be up really early. So within reason, when I actually had the opportunity to train full time, which was only a small part of my career, but I did get that, it actually felt quite nice. And it's also always a balance, if one sport's not going well, or you're just excelling in one, or you've got a niggle that you can't do something so well, there's always something else to focus on. So I found it. And also, you're not going to get bored. There's a lot of perks, even though it sounds like, wow, must have so much training. Equally, as athletes, we all do as much training as we can do to reach our best. So it's kind of you're still pushing yourself, whatever your sport.
And you're now don't do so much Modern Pentathlon, but you're really involved in Ironman and triathlon.
So it's very different in a sense. The swim and the run are the same, but they're much shorter in Modern Pentathlon. It was 3K run to 200 meter swim, whereas now triathlon, depending on what distance you're doing, is sort of the shortest swim's 1,500 meters up to 3.8K. And yeah, so triathlon is very much, I guess, more like rowing, and the fact it's just a lot of aerobic and anaerobic work of just huge amount of miles and getting the engine sort of in and physically working hard most of the time. Whereas pentathlon, is more varied, I guess, because if you want the history, it's from 1912. It came into the Olympics for the first time, hence the modern aspect of it. And it was designed by the modern Olympic founder Pierre de Coubertin, who wanted a sport that encompassed the most all-round athletes. So hence why it's like really quite a mixture of sports that actually they all demand something quite different, which is quite nice.
Would you be happy to sort of talk us through what a week for you looks like now? Because I know you've got different hats on and doing lots of different jobs.
Yeah, well, in a sense, it's like I am employed in a full-time job now, and that is one job, but it sort of has lots of elements to it. So I work for a YouTube channel called Global Triathlon Network, and I've been a presenter and sort of researcher. We write our own scripts, we come up with ideas, we work with the producer to make things happen. We work in post-edit as well, and I've been doing that for 8 years, and it basically involves making content around us potentially doing challenges. So it's quite cool. We get to come up with ideas of like crazy things we want to go and do. And the most recent was me actually racing initially earlier in the year and then qualifying for the half Ironman World Champs, which were in Marbella. But equally alongside that, I was racing, and then I made sort of 4 other videos whilst I was there. So it's kind of always like I have to remember that I'm doing it as for fun, and it's also my job. So it's a real privilege to get to do that. But if I was doing it off my own back, I'd be resting more and taking it a bit more seriously, but it's probably good that I don't. But yeah, the Mondays are normally, for example, today, it was a day filming the show. And I also, yes, the sport is sort of our job, but we don't get time to train at work. So it's a training before work or at lunchtime. And lots of people often ask me, like, how are you still motivated? Because I'm purely racing as an amateur. And then I did go through a blip of like, I almost feel embarrassed to say, because I still want to train, I want to compete. And I know that I'm not competing at such a high level, but I also then realize when I've had time of not doing it, that I'm not such a nice person. Like I need sport, and I'm not very motivated. So I need goals to then motivate me. So it's that sort of circle. And whether that goal is being fit enough to be able to do a certain video at work. And we're quite often like, I work with 2 male presenters, so I have to keep myself relatively fit to be able to do things with them as well and make sure I'm involved. So yeah, it is at the moment, the summer has been mad because we've had a huge amount of travel, which has been great fun. But I was in Hawaii, so no one's going to be like, oh, poor Heather. But that was a full-on trip for sort of 10 days. I came back from there, had 2 days in the UK, was in Girona, doing another triathlon that I was also filming but got to race, which was great fun. Had 10 days back in the UK, and I was off to Spain racing at the half Ironman World Champs. And I took sort of some time off in the summer to go and work at an event in China for the World Games, which was sort of on holiday, so to speak. But yeah, so it's been a very, very busy summer, and it's been my first summer back full time because last year I was on maternity leave. So it's just sort of balancing that now with a little one, but also balancing it with being fit enough to be able to do these opportunities and sort of, but also not too tired. So that it's finding that life balance. I think it's always changing. But a typical week there's no such thing, but at the moment it's more typical than normal, and I'm quite enjoying that of just like, oh, I can go and see a friend after work, or oh, I can go meet someone for coffee at lunchtime, and I do work in the office 3 or 4 days a week, and yeah, I enjoy that. Actually, I enjoy that sort of environment, and it's an easy commute. I can run it if I want as well to get to work. Drop the little one off at nursery, and then go to work. And then the evenings are sort of just catching up and stuff. I'm less motivated in the winter. I'm definitely glad that I did a summer sport because I'm not very good at getting up in the mornings, which is bizarre because I did swim for my whole, and I never miss any morning swims. And I think it's just like I'm still in debt of my mornings. Anyone who knows me is like, how did you ever swim in the mornings? I'm like, I did, I promise, but I'm not. But then I'm not good in the mornings, but I like the feeling of doing something before work and that satisfaction you get. So yeah, I do try and force myself to get up and get out of bed, and that's why cycling is great. I've got a bike on the turbo, I can just get on and ride my bike.
That is quite a fun job that you're actually having to like research your own stuff.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research, and I really enjoy that. And I have a degree in physio, so I sort of got quite a like interest in how the body works, and that element still comes through in sort of what I do. And I'm fascinated in just how the body moves, and from the coaching aspect and the physio aspect. And I find that I get to like then go and investigate things that I want to know more about and make content from it. So yeah, that element's quite cool.
Like this week, I want to see how much ice cream I can eat. And
how I can burn it
while
off.
I'm cycling.
yeah, exactly. But it is really cool because like just the trips we go on recently, just it was a women's only race in Kona, and just seeing actually the amount of people that come up and like watch our content and learn from our content, and that's like super inspiring. That's kind of why I do the job, really. I think because there's days when you're like, where's this content even going? Who's watching it? And when you meet the people who are actually watching it and are benefiting from it, it's very rewarding.
It is really bizarre because it kind of just goes out there and then you maybe see some numbers and you're like, oh, maybe that was good.
Yeah.
I guess. Is
exactly.
that a bot or is that is it
AI?
AI?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, well, it sounds like Modern Pentathlon is like the chaos of it is following you to everyday life. You've still got all your plates spinning.
Yeah.
Now that you've sort of doing the triathlon stuff more, that's your focus. I know that's more current. So what would you say is sort of the best and the worst parts of triathlon?
Gosh, I think at the moment, the worst part in a sort of bigger picture is politics in triathlon and World Triathlon and in Ironman, which are two separate bodies, but they've had all sorts going on this last year and lots of changes and lots of sort of mess ups. And I look at it from both the age groupers, which, and I compete as an age grouper myself, but I also work in the sport, so we cover a lot of what the pros are doing. So it's an unusual sport in the fact that you do have it as an Olympic sport, yet you have huge amount of competitive age groupers who come into the sport later in life. I know rowing has masters and running has masters, but they tend to be people that come through the sport, whereas triathlon gets a lot of people that come in at sort of middle age or 30s and 40s. So it's very different in that sense. So yeah, I guess the sort of bad part at the moment is almost that element. And weirdly, I would also say on a sort of more direct element is the swim. Even though I'm a strong swimmer when it comes to triathlon, I just don't like swim training. Having done like so many hours as a child and as a teenager and in my 20s, now swimming is just such an effort. And the bit I love is just the community aspect and the fact that it is the pros and the age groupers racing together, and it's like it is such a big bubble. Yes, it is still a bubble, like everyone, so you can take sport too seriously, but it's the fact that you have Olympians racing with athletes who have won the Ironman World Championships, which is, to some people, that's bigger kudos to the Olympic medal. To me, it's not. But then you also have the likes of me now and lots of other people who are racing with them on the same course. So the sport sort of hits really well with that, and the fact that it's really like involves everybody and it's much more accessible than Modern Pentathlon was as well.
I've been talking recently with the two sisters who are starting a female-focused triathlon clothing company, and they also started in Modern Pentathlon and have changed over to do Ironmans / triathlons. And they were saying one of the best parts is the community as well, similar to what you're saying, is lots of sort of like-minded people just sort of getting stuck in with it. Do you have a sporting ick?
I don't really know if it's an ick, like in a sense, but I was thinking about this earlier when I was walking back from work, and it's more something that I guess bugs me, which is similar. But it's like I think more in running, but in cycling as well, or any endurance-y sport that isn't skill based, so to speak, is to be able to do it solely with other people. And one of my sort of bugbears is if I want to go with a friend, and I'm like, look, I can be in either capacity, but it really annoys me if someone sort of goes out with a group or encourages people to come along and then they just ride or run faster than that person's comfortable. And I just think as the faster person, you've always got the ability to slow down and to make that other person feel comfortable, especially if you've encouraged them to come along. And then as a result, you get so many people, myself included, and friends who are like, oh no, I'm too slow to go and run with them, or I can't cycle with them because I won't keep up. And I'm like, well, if they invite you on a ride or a run and they want you to come, then they're the ones who can go slow. You can't go faster. So, and that's something that I've always been very aware of if I'm in that situation of maybe being the stronger athlete, but equally it's the other way around. And I think, that's something that just sort of maybe slightly upsets me when it's almost like an ego thing of like, oh yeah, I'm actually going to go, I can be faster than that person. It's like, well, it's an easy ride or an easy run.
Yeah, it's very misleading to invite someone, to do it together and then suddenly bugger off.
Or running in a group run with headphones on. That's another one that gets me. I'm like, what's the point in doing a group run? Just go for a run on your own, because the whole point is chatting, in my mind. Maybe it's for safety, but I just think if I'm like, we've had a few group runs in the past, and there was one girl who just A, went out the front, and B, had her headphones on. So I'm just like, why don't you just go run on your own? Because that's what you're doing.
Like, why bother?
Yeah.
There is some research to suggest that training as a big group increases your pain tolerance. Or training in synchronized movement increases your pain tolerance. But running out the front, even if you're with a group, doesn't really.
Yeah, I guess with rowing you can't do that. You're stuck in the same boat. So
Well, yeah, you're stuck in the same boat, but you'd be surprised. You'd be like, "Oh, do you want to paddle today together?" And the person would be like, "Yeah, all right." And then they just leave you for dust, or they like cut you up on the turns, or they like clip a blade, or they'll like see you're about to hit a bush and then just like not mention it, and then
Well,
you're just
nice.
stuck in it for like 5 minutes.
Nice.
Not so good. Every sport has its, there's always that little competitive
Mm.
bit, so you're towing the line, isn't it? The main part of our podcast is dying on the hill. So would you like to introduce the dying on the hill topic of this week?
Yeah, I think it's as a woman in sport, there's a topic that has been taboo that is becoming more openly spoken about, which is great, but on the fact of your body clock ticking, and if you want to have children and you want to do sport, and how you go about that. And the landscape is changing, but it's taking a long time. And when I was still a modern pentathlete, it was a real sort of, I guess, topic in a sense of, in our sport, and in British sport, it was not a done thing to be able to have a child and come back to sport. And that's one thing that triathlon is doing really well, even though it's still moving, it's still learning, it's still developing. It's something that I feel like as an athlete, you shouldn't have to sacrifice the opportunity to be able to have children if you want them.
It's a real interesting one. I sort of looked into it today, and UK Sport have a pregnancy guideline for athletes, which was published in December 2023. And currently there is a big long timeline of quota that you have to meet in order to keep your funding. You conceive your child, you let everybody know that that's what's happening, you come up with a program, you agree to a training program and a timeline, you have your baby. Within 6 months of having your baby, you need to let the UK Sport know whether or not you're going to return to sport, which is absolutely fair enough. At the 9-month point, you will then be assessed as to whether or not you have the potential to continue as an athlete or not. So that's the current guideline. And one of the sort of things that sprung to mind for me when I was looking it up was that currently coaches internationally, only 20% of these high performance coaches that are performing on Olympic stage are women, and the other 80% are male.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that men wouldn't have, they wouldn't be able to make the right decision. But when you're reviewing whether or not a woman would be able to get back into that position, you might not have as much lived experience.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I need to rewind a little bit of why it's something that's I didn't know about the policy. I knew that there was a policy. I didn't know what was in it. And that's more since following triathlon, because at the moment there's not been any athletes in modern pentathlon in Great Britain who've had children and come back to performing at any level. They've just sort of retired and then gone on to sport. But I was, I guess, a later bloomer in pentathlon in a sense. Like, I was 25 when I won my medal, but I was still improving, and I was still improving at the age of 30. And I was basically brought into the office and told in, not a few more words, but not many more words, that, what are you going to do next? And isn't it time you start to think about having a family because you're 30? And at the time I did think that I was old, and that but I wasn't even in a situation that I was going to be able to, I wasn't in that position. I wasn't thinking, it wasn't on my radar, and I didn't even know if I wanted to have a family. So I, found it really difficult to sort of understand how to take this, because I was being told that I'm too old, yet there was no sign other than the number of my birth certificate that I was too old. And the decision was taken out of my hands in that sense, that it's like, well, we think that that's best for you, and that there basically are no more opportunities. And I was still performing, so that I wasn't allowed to use the numbers to prove that. And I did then obviously have to retire and moved on. And it's not the retirement element that I have a problem with, because I've gone on and done lots of great things, and it probably was potentially the right time, but not for that reason, and not to have something like that explained to you. And I think even now, 15 years on, if a coach or a performance director said that, they would most probably be reprimanded, at least by the UK Sport, and probably, if the press got hold of that, it's now something that isn't done. It's not okay to speak to a woman. You wouldn't probably turn around to a man at 30 and say, oh, maybe I think you should be thinking about having a family now, because even if you did think they should be, that wouldn't be an effect in their career, so to speak, and it wouldn't be implying that that's an effect to their career. So that was something that I I was sort of still shocked by it. And the weird thing is, it was said from a kind place. Like our team were very Eastern European based at the time, and I guess in Eastern Europe then as well, there was more emphasis on family than maybe in the UK. That also people were having children younger, and it was sort of what you did after sport. You went and had children. That was like the norm, and they were kind of thinking, I think, generally thinking, oh, well, we need to sort of almost look after Heather here or help her, even though I didn't take it that way at the time.
I think I've made notes on your dying on the hill around the topic of basically, being able to get pregnant and then return into sport as opposed to being pushed out of sport.
Yeah, I think I'm more just wanting to talk about their overall, but then that leads on to the next point, I think. So
Okay.
yeah, you are on the right track, but I think of what I'm applying from that is like, it wasn't even seen as a opportunity or an option to be able to do that. And the fact that sport is changing, but it's still got a very long way to go in that. And I think triathlon is doing it well, that we are seeing athletes come back and perform at such a high level, but they have such a huge amount to risk with doing that. They've got to make that decision of, they don't know if their sponsors will still support them through that. They don't know whether their sport will select them, or whether they'll be biased against them because they've now got children. But they also don't know if they'll be able to, if their support network is enough, if they'll be able to do it. And then the unknown of, will your body be okay at the other side? So I think there's so much to that there's so much more support needed for these women. And I've heard so many horror stories. There's an endurance athlete who was running for Nike, and she had to come back and do a track session or do a performance 2 weeks after having her baby. And I was listening to this podcast whilst I was pregnant, and I was just there like, that is quite disgusting. And it was male coaches, and she was basically told that she had to do that to fulfill her contract because she'd had her 2 weeks. I mean, this is in America as well, where you get a lot less maternity leave. And I was just like, how could, I mean, obviously it was a man-led group and a man-led sort of contract in a sense, because I don't think, even if you haven't had children, I don't think a woman could imagine that. And I couldn't at the time, having not had a child. And I was just like, that just sounds, and as a result, she had so many problems for so much longer, and like her teammates were great support, but she couldn't control most of her bodily functions still at that point, because she just had a baby 2 weeks ago, but was still able to run because she's just an incredible athlete and can push herself. But we've come a long way in a sense from that, but there's still a long way to go.
I have a list: Alison Felix, Alyssa Montano, Joe Pavley, Liz McColgan,
yeah.
McColgan Nuttall. I think that's McColgan Nuttall, or maybe she was just McColgan at the time. Yeah. But Alison Felix, definitely with Nike, she was dropped and expected to take a 70% cut. And then in 2019, after that, I think Nike had to review their contracts.
Yeah.
One of the comments from that is that the tagline for Nike is "Just do it," and it's really encouraging women to do it at any level. Anyone can be involved. And the athletes were sort of saying it's all for TV, and behind closed doors, it's not for us. Like, we don't get to just do it at any level. We will be penalised, or we will be dropped, or whatever, whatever term you want to use. Another from my rowing circle, if you like, one of the rowers who won a bronze medal in Paris commented that British sport were treating pregnancy as an illness rather than people having a child and then returning to sport. So, and then, well, anyway, she showed them she's got her bronze medal.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy. The strong women are the ones that speak out about it, but it says how many women who either don't have children and then end up it's too late, so that they can't have children. And sadly, I do know quite a few in my sport that were in that situation, and partly because they pushed their bodies so hard that maybe they were a little bit verging on Med S, or they were in Med S, and to try and succeed in their sport, and then as a result also then trying to have children later. So the two things combined, it just meant that they then have missed an opportunity that was something that for them was really important. So it's there's definitely been those who have had children have done it exceptionally well. I mean, Joe Pavey, you mentioned there, I know Joe well and spoke to her quite a bit when I was pregnant, because I just thought she's come back every time and she's just absolutely smashed it, and it's incredible. And she runs sort of very low key in a sense, and she's a Devon girl like myself. And her husband helps a lot in the fact that he coaches and works, and I guess has a flexible job around that. But the way she she has had the support in a sense from UK sport, but she was an athlete at the level where she also had sponsors who did, I don't know the whole ins and outs, and I never actually sort of asked her about that, but I was just more in awe and always asking her just the actual how to return to kind of fitness and whatever after a child, and also getting older in sport because she was still performing in her early 40s at the Olympic level, which was amazing. So yeah, I've some massive respect for someone like Jo who can do it. And some people can come back and perform irrelevant, and some sports rely on funding or rely on selection more than others, and some sports it's a matter of just you have to do the qualification yourself, and therefore it's your own I guess timeline of your return. But I do think when the timeline is pressured like that, it's something that's so difficult, and some athletes can bounce back, and I hate the pressure that then puts on others who can't. And I think working in the space where there's a lot of amateur athletes, but there's also pros, and we want to look up to the pros. And some of the pros are, there's a girl called Emma Pallant-Brown who's just had a baby, and she's won medals at half Ironman world champs, and she's one of the top triathletes in the world. And she won a 10K, I think, or something like 2 months after her baby, and she's just nailed high rocks with her baby's now 10 weeks old. But she's one of those that is amazing to watch. But I think it's also, if taken out of context, can be dangerous to other women who are then trying to plan their own journey, because I think everybody is so different. And I think the support networks and the protocols and the selection policy and everything need to all take that into account, because I don't think you can say like X time. Yes, for obviously saying whether you're coming back or not, and you probably had an idea of that beforehand, but actually whether who gets to say that this is when you should be back performing after something so major. And I think sport does have a real tendency to treat pregnancy like an injury, because that's what we know in sport. And you have time frames, and you have healing times, and within reason, if you work with physios and things, that's helpful, because there is still tissue that needs to heal. But there's also a lot more complicated factors of ligaments changing due to breastfeeding, which can also in theory give you benefits, because it means you've got more red blood cells, so you could have a better VO2 outcome as a result. But that comes with downsides. So I just think there's a lot more to be understood, and one of the biggest problems is there's just so little research in the area and so little protocol, and that's really surprised me. I again, whilst pregnant, did some research speaking to Jess Learmonth, who won an Olympic gold in the relay in Tokyo, and she had a baby 2 years ago. And she was going through this, still funded by British Triathlon, and trying to work out, she had to come back and she had to start performing, but she didn't really know like what that's going to look like. And then she has to go to competitions when she's got a child that she's taking with her, and there's a lot more. It costs more, and then whether that's expected to be covered by the sport, and some sports do. And I think British Triathlon have changed that, and there are more athletes doing it and coming back. And performance-wise, in the long term, there's nothing to show that athletes won't return to where they were, and quite often come back better. And there's so many at the moment in endurance sports, especially, that are coming back better. And I just think that men don't have to deal with that dilemma within like a certain extent. Obviously, having a child as a man is still impactful on your training and on your life and everything. So I don't want to sort of demean that aspect of
you said demeanor. I was going to say poo-poo.
Yeah. So but I just my back to sort of the original one, that there's so much more research, and the whole problem is in women's sport, full stop, there's not enough research, because we are different to men, and we have cycles and hormones, and they don't like to obviously cost more to do all that testing. And then you add the pregnancy and post-pregnancy element, there's even more changes, and even less research as a result.
I was going to just comment on different policies in sport. I think the Red Roses or rugby have actually put a policy in where you will be covered for your pregnancy, and then your child will be able to travel with you and paid for until they're 1.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But that's the only thing I've heard of is rugby.
The IOC this year in Paris was the very first time, last year at the Olympics, the very first time that they actually were allowing, I think, 18-month-olds and under to come into the athlete village, and putting on breastfeeding facilities and things like that. So it is changing, and and I think the more it changes, it'll snowball, because the more they'll see athletes coming back and performing at such a high level, and then they'll see that the support is enabling them to do that, and it's enabling sport to grow and move forwards. Because otherwise, in a theory, you could be losing a massive, chunk of female athletes once they get to an age where they want to have children, whatever age that is.
The comment on Paris 2024, there's an article, it's like the word of the day or whatever is mums, and it was out of our 9 female athletes who were mums representing the UK, 8 of them had won Olympic medals, which is just proves the point really that it's not like they're coming back and they're not competitive. They're so competitive, and it can and should be supported. One of the very sort of quick bits I wanted to touch on is something that I saw. It's a study from 2009, and basically one of the phrases which really not resonated with, but sort of hit me a bit, was that motherhood is often associated with career termination. And I feel like that's really true as an athlete, thinking back to like my university time as I was then going up into high performance or international stage. I think about like the sex ed that we got at school and all of that. I thought that if someone sneezed near me, I might get pregnant, and then that would be the end of my rowing career. Do you know what I mean? It was so serious and so be all and end all. And I think also that we're sort of shown really excitingly that we can do everything, and there are female athletes at the Olympics that are winning medals as mothers, and they're very competitive, and we can return to sport. But I think there's also when we're talking about the policies that aren't maybe fully supporting us, is it's kind of like we're being sold a dream, but we're not actually being given the dream, if that makes sense.
I think there's going to be more pressure on whether it's the national federations, whether it's the actual governing bodies themselves, for freezing rankings and things like that. That I think tennis now put a freeze on rankings.
Yeah, tennis have.
Yeah, triathlon have got something similar like that, and they actually now have a sort of body within triathlon that's privately funded, and that is ranking athletes, and then it's also giving them a maternity sort of salary or an amount anyway. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and as a result, I think we have seen a lot more younger athletes just recently have children who are racing in that league, and that's I just think it's going to then mean that they've got longer in their career to carry on with the sport, because they're not going to be looking at the their age and going, oh, maybe just one more year and then I'll have to just say, right, I'm having babies now. So actually, I just think it's so positive for the sport and for the industry within the sport that it will then, more people will see younger people, little people, whatever, being at events, and just the sort of next generation, hopefully inspiring, and it'll inspire those actual kids themselves to be involved in high performance. So I know I've changed since having a child in the way I look at it, but I think before I did, because I didn't know, if I was going to have children, but I think still looking at it, not being like, oh, I wish I'd had children, I wish I'd had that opportunity or that support, and it almost to be then used in a negative way to like imply that I need to do something else, was like the double sort of whammy in the fact that like it's not like, oh, if you thought about that because there's this support. I mean, that's like it was a million miles away back then. So there's a massive change, and it's really cool, but it's almost only happening because those women are like Alison Felix are bold enough to step out there and do it and make it work and talk about it as they're doing it.
What you were explaining earlier, I was really taken aback that had been what your experience was. I thought we were going to go down like, this is what it needs, this is what needs to be. So I was like, oh, geez, like, you hear about it in a news headline, and then you don't always expect for someone to, well, actually, that's a complete lie. I do actually expect most people to be like, yeah, but it's still like, it still takes you a moment to be like, oh shit, like it is alive and well.
Yeah. But I think the thing that does sadden me is like the athletes who's just not been able to, and have waited a little bit longer because they're scared of just their career being over. And we're very privileged to be able to have sport as a full-time athlete, like whatever sport you're doing. It's a dream for most people. So if you get to live that dream, you don't want to stop living it either. So it's it's not just the system, there's a bigger picture and there's fear around it, and there's a lack of education and the lack of like protocols with just speaking to Jess, who still is an Olympic gold medalist. She was working, yes, with a physio and with people, but there was no actual protocol. There was no like, this is this is what the next steps are. And, I was trying to sort of get from her to then share with my audience, with the work I do, of like, well, how do you know how to go about returning to sport? And, the NHS guidelines do not apply to anyone who does sport at even a relatively high level. It's like, cool, 6 weeks. All right, we'll see you at the checkup with your child, and like, off you go. But equally, it's the same with the training during pregnancy as well. There was very little out there. And there's a few people who are pioneering and doing loads more research, and especially in the endurance sport, because so many people are doing it. But then endurance athletes who are training through this are probably such high pain thresholds and such extreme athletes that it's almost like, what do you pick from that as well? And how do we educate people that you can do sport and you can recover and come back and still be amazing afterwards?
Yeah, you're like, where's the average?
Yeah.
Where's
You gotta work it out yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a work in progress. I was also, when you said about the NHS, I was like thinking about the BMI thing, which just doesn't really seem to apply to athletes at all either, because muscle
you're
mass and
heavy, but
everything.
you're lean. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, it did sort of make a pregnancy. I was very lucky that I am still sort of have access to lots of people within sport, but you should just do some regular walking. And I was told by one doctor that, if you can sort of manage to walk for 30 minutes a day, that would be great. And I was like, I've already been for a run today, and I'm like, whatever. It's not the NHS fault, the doctor's fault, but it's just like the fear of doing exercise during pregnancy is something that's still real, which really saddens me, because it's the same with everyday life. You just need to be healthy. And if your normal is running or swimming or doing whatever, then do it. And I'm not a health professional, so I'm not going to start giving out advice, but we're all very intuitive of how our bodies work. And if your body is happy doing it, you're probably a good thing to keep doing it.
The podcast is a big advocate for listening to your body. So I think that's the best advice, isn't it? Listening to your body. Do you have a favourite moment that you are happy to share?
I mean, I think I just have to go with the obvious.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trick question when you ask someone who's been at an Olympics and been successful, because they're like, well...
Yeah, I'm trying to think of another time, but I'll just come back to that one. I was just sort of, I think the whole day of in Beijing, because it was like, our sport does take all day, and there was lots of elements to it, and it's started okay, but I wouldn't say like I was like on for a medal from the very start of the day, and luckily it sort of finishes with my strengths. But going into the run, I knew pretty much I was going to get a medal, because roughly if everyone's running standard, we all compete against each other all year for however many years. And I did personally think the girl starting behind me, who was from Ukraine, had run previously at the Europeans 5 weeks before. She'd run a whole minute quicker than me, and she was starting 40 seconds behind. And I was like, she was a long way down. There's a lot of people before her who were close behind me, and I was like, no, I can run faster than them. And I was like, and even my coach and my friend Katie, who was also competing, we were like, yeah, we got to watch out for her. And I ran the same time as her, but and it also does turn out that she no longer has her bronze medal that she got, so that's the story for another day. But the drugs obviously didn't work that day very well, but which is very sad, because we didn't share the podium with the right people, so to speak. But I think for me, the main part of the whole day was sharing it with Katie, is like one of my best friends, and she was becoming one of my best friends, I guess, at the time. Like, we'd only been competing together for a year, really, and she ended up finishing 7th, now 6th, I think. But the two of us, we enjoyed every moment of that day at the Olympics, and we were like, this is our opportunity. We might never do it again. We didn't do it again, but it was just running around the arena. So we were at not the Bird's Nest, but another track that had 20,000 people in the stadium. And for the warm-up, we were just running around, and we're in China, the other side of the world, and the amount of British flags that were just there, like waving, and we were just running around doing our warm-up, just waving at everybody. It was like, this is crazy. We're still like got to do another 3K, you're like part of the competition, and we're here just like, this is so crazy. So I don't actually think it was the standing on the podium. It was like the whole part of it, and also sharing it with someone who I so admire in the way that she could wholeheartedly be behind me, as well as competing herself and giving her best performance on the day. And yes, she's incredibly competitive, and she won a bronze at the World Champs going into that, so maybe was favourite over me. And that she could 100% be, she was so happy for my result at the end of the day. There was no like, annoyed at her own performance. And I don't know if I could have been that good a friend or that good a competitor. I think sport does give you friends for life. And that was definitely a sort of real moment to be able to share it with someone in an individual sport as well. That is so, you're racing against your teammates all the time, and you're racing against them for most of the year to get into the team, and once you're in the team you're then competing against them again on competition day. I guess it made it more special, and I was very lucky to have that experience, because I know some of the athletes in the past it hasn't been the same relationship because the nature of our sport. And when I was on the podium, I do remember having a thought, which I guess takes me back to another moment that wasn't significant until now, but as a swimmer, I wanted to go to the Olympics. I had a swimming scholarship at school, and I swam up to 20 hours a week, and that was just my life. That was normal. I enjoyed it. I crazily liked I didn't like getting up in the morning, but I liked doing 2 hours of training before school and 2 hours after school, and I never missed any training, and that gave me the base for pentathlon. But our coach at the time, I think, almost felt for me because I was so consistent and trained so hard, and I never quite was good enough as a swimmer, and had a friend who just would always beat me in racing, and she trained hard as well, but it was just I think she was a year younger.
Always humbling.
Yeah, and I was like, and he said to me after one session one day, and he's an older man, Scottish. He'd coached a lot of Olympic medalists and champions in swimming, and he's like, Heather, I know that one day you'll do it. You'll get there. And I was like, I didn't dare ask him what he meant by that either. And I don't even know if he knew, but it was like that really resonated. And it was his son who was then helping me with my coaching when I actually did stand on the podium. And Archie, I think, is 94. He's still going. And I haven't seen him for a long time, but sort of the swimming community knows, sort of he's a significant man, and just to have something from someone who didn't really give compliments either, that was quite I think as a young person it was like, I'm a bit scared by that comment, but motivated at the same time.
That's so lovely. And I think athletes always start out where they're like, obviously it's going to be the Olympic medal, but actually the story always ends up being something about community and connection. And or somebody at one point saying a special thing and then that actually really resonating with you. So far in the podcast, it's never been holding the medal and looking down at it. It's been the process of getting to that point and the people that have been involved in it. And I think that's really lovely. I mean, the podcast is focused around women, so I don't know if that's specific too, but it might just be. But it is always lovely to hear that there is such a journey. And I know we spoke to Laura, who does Olympic skeleton, and she was on the podium with a bronze medal when Lizzie Arnold, and she was saying that, that friendship, being on the podium at the same time and actually being able to be friends and teammates was so special. So two individual sports again. Do you have a best fuck up that you're happy to share with
I've got lots. Probably one of the ones that I can now laugh at was actually in China. It was in, I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 years, probably 3 years after the Olympics, and there was a World Cup, so still a fairly big competition. And was it World Cup final? I don't remember. I think it was World Cup. And it was only the semi-finals, so we have semi-finals and then finals, and you have to just sort of get through. And on the whole, as Brits, we were normally good enough to get through to the final, but still there was always that slightly scary moment that you need to make sure you performed enough. And we were all staying in a hotel. I had to get the bus. It was like an hour's journey to the stadium in the middle of nowhere in Chengdu, which is in the south of China. And I was just always quite chatty with my friends and all of my teammates, and can sometimes be a bit, in the eyes of the coach, a bit too laid back, but I sort of always delivered when I had to. And we'd got on the bus, and we'd been on the bus for 45 minutes or so. No, I think we'd got off the bus, and all our bags, they're massive, the pentathlon bags. So you've got all your fencing kit. We didn't have a riding kit because you don't ride in the semi-finals, but I had all our fencing kit, our pistols, and then all our swim kit. And so it's this big long bag, so they all go underneath the bus in the whole bit. And so waiting for the bags to come off, and then all the bags had come off, and then I was like, and I think I went to performance check. I was like, have you picked up my bag? He's like, no. And then I was looking under, I was like, well, where's my bag? And then I spoke to our performance director. I was like, oh, I thought you put it on the bus. He's like, well, no, Heather, why would I put your bag on the bus? And I literally, my heart sank. And then my coach was like, Heather, where's your bag? And I was like, well, when did you last see it? I was like, I last saw it in reception, piled up with our bags. And everyone else had picked up their own bag and I hadn't picked up mine. And this was an hour away. And the fencing started in we warmed up, and then the actual competition started in about an hour. So I had no fencing kit, and you have to compete, otherwise you're out. So I went around and having to beg and explain and borrow it with quite a big language barrier because we were in China, and there was a few of the Chinese coaches, and I basically borrowed bits of kit. I think I had some bits from my friends, and then there was a couple of there was one jacket that I had to. Actually, I'm remembering more stories now. The fencing jacket that I had to borrow that was so far too big. It was literally like watching a child wear some adult's kit. And I had to start the competition with this whilst the performance director got a taxi back to the hotel and back again. And I knew I was in trouble, but I did go on to perform well in the final. So I sort of got away with it. And he laughed about it afterwards. But I was like, I am in so much trouble. I'm like, oh God, what an idiot. I have done a few other things. I know I did in Hungary when I was a very young athlete. I did oversleep it was when we started with the shooting, completely overslept. There's been a few situations like that. And they've never let me live them down, but I'd always sort of got there. And I think there was one time I'd even forgotten my gun, and this time it didn't end so well. I borrowed a gun, but I think the coach was trying to teach me a lesson. It was a smaller level competition, and I wasn't allowed to move the sights on this gun that he'd managed to borrow me. So I didn't shoot very well, surprisingly, in that one, but I think that was maybe a lesson to learn. So there's been a few little mess ups, I guess, but
small blips.
Yeah. There's been a few more, but that's probably enough for now.
Traveling to venue in a different country, there's so much room for error.
Yeah.
I think we were in Serbia and we were traveling to the lake, and it's I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. And me and one of my teammates were lying in the hotel room. We've just painted our nails as something to take our mind off of, because you race and then you have a break.
Yeah.
And then you might do another race or whatever. Or there's a period of time and we're like, oh, what should we do? Paint our nails. Anyway, then we're both playing Candy Crush, and I think one of us fell asleep. And then suddenly we're 5 minutes late. I'm running for the bus, and the nail varnish is just stuck all over the hands. It's going everywhere, and we'd done it specially so it'd be nice for the final. And it's all crusty and falling off. And then so nervous on the bus because we were so late that I'm picking it all off onto the way to the course.
Oh, but you made the bus.
Made the bus and medalled. So that was all fine. But a little bit stressful.
Yeah.
And then I deleted Candy Crush straight off my phone. I was I'm never trusting myself on that again.
That has made me realise I did miss a flight on the way to a World Cup. And it was a flight from Heathrow to America. And I was in more trouble because it was since winning my medal that I had access to the lounge, and we were in the lounge, and I took one of the other athletes in with me. So we both missed our flight. We had a connecting flight I think it was in Dallas. Amazingly, we managed to, and we didn't have to pay very much. I think we had to pay £100 or something. We managed to get on another flight, and we still caught up with the guys and got the next connection. But the coach was not going to help us. He was like, you've done that. And we were the bus was still there. We ran to the desk, and then the bus for them to get to the plane was still there, and they were like, no, it's closed. And we're like, come on. So that was I was literally heart in mouth. What an idiot. I was so cross with myself. And then the relief you get when you actually get there at the other end was oh. So
you're I'm never going to do anything ever like that again.
No,
and then 5 minutes later, you're oh, damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many, I said, so many spinning plates though. And for you with all the sports as well, I imagine so much equipment to take through an airport.
Oh, there's so much. I mean, that's one of the things that I loved the most when I retired, is just travelling without the pentathlon bag. It would weigh about 30 kilos normally. We had to try and keep it under 32 because that's the limit. And it's got it's sort of almost I guess my shoulder height when it stood up. It's so hard to carry, and in fact the wheel got broken in the flight or whatever to try and then wheel it, because it's got wheel on one end, but it's still ruin your hand on the other end because it's only got 2 wheels. Yeah, it was just the bane of everyone's life. And then you'd have to like walk miles to a bus, or I don't know. I do not miss the fencing bag at all. And yeah, you think the amount of kit, like riding kit on its own weighs enough, and then you need 4 epées, and then you've got all your fencing kit, and it's like heavy stuff because it's got to be protective. It's a ridiculous kit list, and I'd always be so scared of forgetting something. Of which I also forgot jumpers one time. I can't remember what I borrowed or did for that, but that was one of the smaller forgetting items.
I've got visions of you going through the airport now with just a passport and a phone, just to like live that life.
Yeah, that said, I do now work for a triathlon channel, so I have to travel with a bicycle, which is an absolute nightmare, or a child. So now actually traveling with a bicycle is the easiest of the two.
Can you not put the child in the bicycle
I've
thing for a bit?
Yeah, he'd fit in that bicycle bag for another few years. I think it's a massive. The amount of times that people ask what's in your bag, like normal travelers, and I was in the lift with people in America recently on that trip to Hawaii, and the bag I have at the moment with work is huge, and we had to get it on the bus to get to the hire car place, and these Americans were like, "Oh, what's in that bag?" And I said, "Oh, don't worry, only a few bodies." And they literally went quiet, and they just like, I could tell she wanted to ask her husband, and she just didn't get my British sense of humour. And then I was like, well, this is actually really quite awkward. And my colleague was there like giggling, and I was like, does she not see the funny side of that? I'm like, obviously got the tone wrong there, but yeah, because you could genuinely fit a few people in it.
Yeah, because they're massive.
Yeah.
That is, language barriers, humour barriers.
Humour barriers on that case. Yeah.
Do you have a mantra or a bit of advice or a saying that you always revert to?
No, I'm not very good at doing that for myself. I sort of do it. I guess I'm good at like relaying it to friends or people that I'm helping or coaching or whatever. Is like, you've done the work, so you've got to believe in yourself, and then having that self-belief. But I'm not very good at doing it myself. And even though I know, like, I've done the work, it's then letting your body do it, and stopping your mind from stopping your body, or like allowing your mind to allow your body to actually do what it can, is, I guess, the sort of what I would emphasize to friends. Although I have like total negative self-talk in endurance sports, it's hard. That's why I like doing things when I've got other people alongside, because I just like to be distracted or entertained or whatever, because I think like our mind is the most powerful tool. We all know we've got the physical ability, or we know what our physical ability is, and why does it work some days and not others, and it's because of the power of the mind.
When I've had to sort of like think about this for myself, one of the phrases that a friend of mine repeated to me often was, "Be the shit that won't flash." You just got to hang on in there and hope for the best.
Something my partner would say, I think. Lovely.
You just got to hang on in there and don't give up. Just keep being a problem. Keep floating. Literally. What would you change in sport? I know we sort of touched on the attitudes around sort of women having to give up their sport in order to start a family, but is there anything specific different to that you would want to change in sport?
I think all the things I want to change are changing, but I just want them to change faster, like equal pay, equal opportunities, equal media coverage. And I think also the understanding that it's not how you look that matters, it's how you perform that matters. And that is also changing, I think, just in the general population, and then how that then rolls down to from professional level, how that rolls down. And then as a young athlete, I was always told that I don't look like a runner, or I don't look like whatever. And then something that I'm really passionate about with when friends are like, oh, they say, I like going running, but I'm not a runner. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, you are a runner, it's okay. It's like, but I don't look like a runner. I'm like, well, what does a runner look like? If you run, then you're a runner. It's like the labeling of that. I think we're seeing more strong bodies than we used to see, and that's something I want to see more of, and more like in endurance sport, which is my forte, but in all sports, it's like, I think body shapes are being celebrated that are different, and it's not like you're not labelled into what you can and can't do because of how you look.
I'd love to know what a runner looks like, because as a child I was told I looked like I could do running well, and I was absolutely terrible.
Whereas I was always told I don't look like one, and even like, and again, bless her heart, she absolutely meant it from like a place of love and wanting me to succeed. But my granny once told me that my bottom is too big for sport and I need to look more like Paula Radcliffe. And she meant that in such like she was a woman who would never say anything nasty, like in that sense. And it's quite I sort of as a teenager I did dwell on that probably too much, and I did at some point in my career I was too light, and realized that isn't the way forward. But it was it's another story, I guess, in a sense. But yeah, just the impact of role models that we see out there and how that's interpreted of what people look like. And then I go back to my friend Katie, who I competed with in Beijing, and I would still describe her if I was trying to explain to somebody, with the caveat now, but she looked like a runner. She's much slimmer than me. We're a similar height, but you would just look at the two of us and say, who's going to win a 3K race? You'd say Katie every time. And we basically were the same speed. We were interchangeable who would win a race between us. And I think I struggled to believe that, and I still do now. Like, I love running, I love run cross country, and I like racing still. And just 2 weeks ago, I lined up on the start line, and in my head, I said to me, there's this girl next to me who was like half my age and half my size. I was like, oh well, I can race for second. It was a half marathon over trail, so it was like quite a long, tough race. And she actually came alongside me and was chatting about my competitive spirit. And I was like, I could hear her breathing. She's breathing more heavily than me, but we're on the flat, and then we had to go down the hill. And she was really nice. So she actually turned out she's at uni. I was like, oh, you should join the club and run for the club. And she's like, oh, I run for the uni club. And so we're having a bit of a conversation, because it's you can, you're racing at that level. And then I was like, well, she'll just leave me on the uphill. I had to go down first. And I thought, maybe I've got more skills. I'll outrun her down the hill. Couldn't drop her on the downhill, and turned to go up the hill. And then she was sort of half on my shoulder, and then she just dropped back. And then I was like, again, I was so shocked. And I'm like, well, I shouldn't be, because it doesn't matter, but it still is. It's so ingrained, and I want to help people get past that of it does not matter what you look like. It matters how you perform and how you feel ultimately as well. I think that's kind of probably the more important part at the end of all of that.
Your granny probably saying you got a big bum probably pointed out how you did better on that hill.
Exactly, yeah.
Stronger glutes.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of, when I was younger, I just didn't understand that strength was also like an element. You just think, and I was in Modern Pentathlon as well when I was young and starting out. All the girls were very thin, some of them too skinny, and there was a bit of an eating disorder problem in the seniors when I was a junior, and it did definitely sort of have an effect on the rest of us. And I look at sport now, and it's so great that everyone's just so healthy, and the importance of strength and the importance of nutrition is so high on the agenda that you don't see stress factors anywhere near as much as you did and things. And yeah, you still do, but that's a real positive. But I think for the way professional sport is still seen by some amateurs in a way, and then amateurs, just anyone who does sport, it's the way they then see themselves as a result, I think is so important, because at the end of the day, that's what I'm a strong believer that sport makes people happy, makes you happy, and it also makes us healthy, and that's a massive burden off the nation.
2012, when I started, there was a massive sort of conversation about power to weight. And it seems like we've really shifted on from that. But I remember being weighed in and out of a session as a 16-year-old and having skin folds done, the body composition. Yeah. And there's been a huge shift from that time in 2012 when I started to now, where it's like you wouldn't dream of doing that. And the stress factors seem to be because everybody's so powerful and strong in the lower body. Yeah. And specifically in rowing, that everyone's got
this ribs.
Yeah, and the ribs are not quite taking it, but there's a huge conversation about, oh well, it's fuel, and then let's train the upper body with weights and make it stronger, and be able to take that force that we've already created instead of dialing it back almost, which seemed to be the conversation in 2012. My final question of the podcast is, what is the soundtrack of the week for you at the moment?
It's only Monday.
Well, soundtrack of last week, if you have one.
Oh my god, I can't even think. I don't even know what I'm listening to at the moment. I don't even know if I can come up with anything.
If you're in the gym though, what would you put on? Or what would your go-to be?
I mean, I'm not a music for sport person. I'm a music with just chilling out in the evenings or cooking or working to. Sort of upbeat chill is my kind of thing, and I don't even know song names, but trying to think what's on my Spotify at the moment, Tame Impala, but there's nothing new coming from them. I haven't finished listening to all of Lily Allen's. I need to do that. Literally the first thing on recommended stations is Tame Impala, so I've obviously listened to quite a lot of that recently, but I don't know if that's my soundtrack though. I'm not it was interesting telling someone at work today and she's like, oh, well, I can only run with headphones on. And I'm like, I'm the opposite. I love just my own head and that like get away and stuff. So I do if I'm in the gym sometimes because I hate the gym, whatever music they're playing in the gym and I hate, so I have to have my own.
You probably use running for like admin time.
Yeah, the amount of ideas you get when you're running, and like the most annoying thing is I always think all things I need to do and then I forget them when I'm back or I get sidetracked and do something else. So and then I go running again. I'm like, oh, I must do that.
You need to start voice noting
Yeah,
on
I
your
do.
phone.
I do.
Well, it depends if you take your phone with you or not.
No, I do take my phone because sometimes I take photos. But recently I realized like normally all my Strava I like have a title and I put a photo on, and I haven't for the last couple of weeks. I've just enjoyed. I've been so busy and so all over the place. I've just like enjoyed just going running and just not thinking, not even getting my phone out of its pocket, and just like it's like a sort of reset time.
Well, thank you very, very much. You have completed the podcast. I really, really appreciate you coming on and giving me your time or giving
No
us your
worries.
time.
Yeah.
It was brilliant to sort of listen to your stories and your take on everything.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. And great to chat.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening to this episode with Heather Fell. I hope you really enjoyed it. As always, please like, follow, comment, all those good things. It really does mean the world. And seeing the little numbers change on the screen is very, very special. Thank you so much for listening this year. And I will see you in 2026. Oh, see you? I will speak to you in 2026. Happy New Year.